Hello and welcome to part 1 in a series of videos that I'm putting out where I break down all the fights taking place at UFC 236 from a betting perspective. Now the last couple of UFC events haven't been very good for betting at all. In fact, out of the 24 fights that have taken place across the last 2 UFC events, I've actually only placed 2 very small pre-fight bets on those events for a small profit. Now I have been much more aggressive with live betting. I think I've placed between 10 and 15 live bets on the last 2 UFC events. I've made a very good profit from live betting the last 2 UFC events, but for pre-fight betting they just haven't been very good at all. Now UFC 236 looks very different. I'm only around 20 to 30% of my way through the research for this card, but already I'm identifying a lot of betting opportunities that I really like. So I'm confident that I'm going to have between 2 and 4 pre-fight bets for UFC 236. This looks like a very good event for betting, and the reason why it's so important to keep things tight on events where there just isn't much value and there aren't many good betting opportunities is that so that when you do get a good event for betting like UFC 236, you have as much money in your betting accounts or your bankroll as possible to fire big, fire aggressively, and try and make as much money as possible. There's no point in putting your money in marginal situations on other events without many good betting opportunities, and then that eats into your account balances, your bankroll, and stops you from being able to compound your profits and make big growth and big gains over time. So I am excited for this one, guys. Just before we get into breaking down the first 3 fights on UFC 236 that I want to talk about, I also want to say thank you so much for your support. The channel's growing quite fast, and if you are watching this video and you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. And also, now I am well and truly back on track. I'm recording this video during a 2-week break before the next UFC event, which means I've got plenty of time to catch up on research and all the admin tasks associated with running my business, which means I can start to pump out these videos a lot sooner. And that also means that the live stream videos that I promised, 3-4 weeks ago when, we were just starting these videos, I can now get back to them. I had to kind of abandon them on the last couple of events because we'd had consecutive UFC events every single weekend since the beginning of February, and my research was just starting to build up and get on top of me, and I didn't have enough time to do them. But now with this 2-week break, for the next 2 or 3 UFC events at least, until I start to get bogged down again, I should easily be able to do live streams on the day of the fight where I break down all the fights taking place at UFC 236 from a prop betting perspective, and I try and find a decent value prop bet to give you guys for every single fight, and where I also take time to answer all your questions in the Q&A on the live stream video that I will be doing on YouTube, and I will schedule in for fight day. So if you want me to do that video, guys, hit the thumbs up button below, and if every video that I put out for UFC 236 gets 150 likes, I will do that bonus live stream video on fight day. But enough of the talking now. Let's get into what you came here for, which is fight talk and betting analysis, and hopefully finding some good opportunities to make some cash betting on UFC 236. So the first fight that I want to talk about is Boston Salmon against Khalid Taha. Now, Boston Salmon was the first name, or one of the first names, that jumped out at me when I started researching this card, just because I remembered how bad Khalid Taha was when he made his UFC debut back in July last year against Nad Narimani. His takedown defense was just very poor. He would kind of run into takedowns, give up takedowns very easily, so I felt that if Boston Salmon had any kind of wrestling at all, this would be a very easy matchup for him. But before we get into how they match up from a stylistic point of view, it is just worth pointing out that both guys are dealing with some issues going into this matchup. So if we take a look at Boston Salmon, he hasn't fought in almost 2 years, so just short of 2 years. He's had multiple fights cancelled because a couple of his opponents have pulled out with injury, and also he had to pull out of a fight with injury. So, he's relatively inexperienced at 6-1, only having 7 pro MMA fights, and having not fought in almost 2 years, you would expect him to be coming into this matchup with a good amount of ring rust that could have an adverse effect on his performance. So, straight away, that's a bit of a red flag with Boston Salmon being so inactive, and also, suffering from an injury, although he has had a long time to recover from it. But Oh, the only other thing I want to say on that is, with a guy like Boston Salmon only having 7 pro MMA fights, probably hasn't made any money in his career at all. So you have to question how a guy like this, who hasn't competed since, you know, you could say even almost 3 years, or certainly 2.5 years, he wouldn't have got paid much competing on Dana White's Contender Series. So the last semi-decent paycheck he would have got was against Zach Riley in RFA, a fight that he lost. I mean, even though this fight was in RFA, they're not going to be paying him much, and he lost. He probably only earned, $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000 max for this fight, which means you have to question how he's been supporting himself over the last 2 years. Has he been able to eat good? Has he been able to train good? Has he been able to train full time? Has he had to focus on working a full-time job to support himself? So all these things mean that Boston Salmon may be facing challenging circumstances coming into the octagon to make his UFC debut. And we also know that a massive percentage of fighters lose when they make their UFC debut due to octagon jitters and the pressures that we just talked about. But Khalid Taha has made his UFC debut just under 1 year ago, where he fought Nad Narimani, but he is also coming in with some issues of his own. So as we can see, he was scheduled to fight Boston Salmon back in November at the TUF 28 finale, but he actually had to pull out of that fight with a torn ACL. And the most concerning part about this for me is that November the 30th was only just over 4 months ago. So what the hell's going on is basically what I'm trying to say. 4 months isn't enough time to recover from an ACL injury. 6 months minimum, more likely 12 months to 18 months. 6 months if you have the latest and greatest surgery and recovery and support network. But with Khalid Taha, being such a young, inexperienced fighter, young in his career, I doubt he's got that kind of support behind him. I doubt he's been able to travel to the kind of specialists and have the kind of surgery and rehabilitation that would enable him to come back in 6 months, let alone 4 months. So I'm not sure what's going on with Taha's injury. Maybe he didn't tear his ACL. Maybe this is wrong on Tapology, but I couldn't find a lot of other information on what injury has kept Taha out. So that is another big red flag. What I would say about both these guys from a stylistic point of view is that they're both primarily strikers. Boston Salmon's got a much more traditional kickboxing style, whereas Khalid Taha has got more of a Muay Thai style. Now, both these guys are primarily strikers. They definitely like to keep fights standing. And if this fight stays standing, I do give Khalid Taha an advantage. Boston Salmon has been quoted as saying that he's the best boxer in the UFC. But the fact is that Khalid Taha throws a much higher volume of strikes per round. He's much more technical. He's much faster. And he also throws a much more diverse range of strikes. Boston Salmon really, only really throws punches, whereas you'll find Taha leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks, knees, elbows, punches, the works. He's a very, very technical striker. Khalid Taha is great to watch when he can keep a fight standing. And that is the real question about this fight. Can he keep the fight standing? And what I would say about Boston Salmon is that Boston Salmon's one of these annoying guys that does look like he knows what he's doing on the ground. Does have quite a heavy top game, but you will very, very rarely see him shoot a takedown on his opponent. If you look back through his record, some of his fights, against Ricky Tercios, Zach Riley, Danny Maynous, they have been closer than they needed to be, just because Boston Salmon doesn't really mix things up that much. He likes to stand in front of his opponent in kickboxing range and try and win a kickboxing match. Even though he looks decent on the ground and on the few occasions that his fights have gone to the ground, for whatever reason, he doesn't want to take his opponents down, or doesn't seem to want to take his opponents down, which puts us in a tricky position in trying to predict how this fight will play out. Because if we look at the odds, let's refresh this to get the latest odds. So Boston Salmon is currently around about an average of, or you can get him around about 1.77 on a good number of sites, which is minus 130, giving him an implied probability of 57%. And in my opinion, he definitely deserves to be the favourite, because even though he's primarily a striker, and I think Khalid's striking is better. It's not a huge difference between the two, it's just different styles. And with Khalid Taha giving up such easy takedowns in his last fight against Narimani, it's really tough at the highest level of the sport to cap him as a favourite against almost anyone, because he is weak off his back and he can be taken down very easily. Having said that, he has spent a good amount of time training at TriStar, so his takedown defense might have improved. But at the same time, if he has suffered a significant knee injury back in the late second half of last year, that knee injury, if it's not fully healed, may also impact his ability to defend takedowns, because he may not be able to create a strong base against the cage. He might not be able to put that much weight on it. It might not be that strong. That's what I'm trying to say. If potentially Khalid Taha is rushing back into a fight because he needs a paycheck, for example. So Boston Salmon should definitely be the favourite here. There's no doubt about it. If we look at the odds on Taha, currently around about an average of 2.15, which is plus 125, giving him an implied probability of 47%. So there's no way I can bet Khalid Taha. I'm just not interested in betting on a guy that really struggles to keep a fight standing and really struggles to work their way back to their feet when they do get taken down. But at the same time, Boston Salmon at 1.77 minus 130. I'm not interested in betting him either, because I haven't really seen him try to take that many of his opponents down in the past. He does have a strong top game. He is decent on the ground. But some fighters are just really stubborn. And if they believe they're a striker and they want to strike, like Boston Salmon said, he thinks he's the best boxer in the UFC. If he really is stubborn and if he really wants to prove himself as a striker, he may try to get into a kickboxing match with Taha, refuse to take Taha down. And if that happens, I do give Taha a slight advantage. I actually do favour Taha in a stand-up fight. So what I'm trying to say is Boston Salmon should be the favourite because Khalid Taha's takedown defence and ground game is so bad. But I don't trust Boston Salmon to exploit that, especially in his UFC debut, where a massive percentage of fighters who make their debut lose. So that is the first fight of the way, guys. I would recommend passing on that one. No value on either side for me. And now the next fight that I want to talk about should be an absolute cracker. It is Jalen Turner against Matt Frevola. This should be a great fight. This should be a war. But because it should be a war, and because it should be so crazy, it is definitely a tricky one for betting. There's no doubt about it that both these guys have huge holes in their overall skill set that can be exploited by their opponent. First of all, if we start off talking about Matt Frevola's holes, his biggest hole is that he's just a crazy guy. He's just a reckless throwback fighter. Without his wrestling, reminds me a lot of Leonard Garcia. He's just happy to get in the octagon and go to war. He's extremely tough. He's got great cardio, a lot of heart, but he doesn't have the best striking defense. He is extremely vulnerable standing, and he's just a wild man. If you go back and watch his last fight against Lando Venata, it ends up being a draw, and it was just absolute chaos from start to finish. Matt Frevola showed absolutely no regard for his own safety at all, continuously put himself in danger, and it turned out being a wild fight. And that is pretty much what you get from Frevola. Every single one of his fights is a war, and his striking defense isn't great, which is a huge weakness against someone like Jalen Turner, who's a very technical striker, very athletic, very fast, very creative, does a great job of fighting long, throws a diverse range of strikes, and who has got legit KO power with their diverse range of strikes, with knees, elbows, punches, and kicks. Jalen Turner's striking is excellent. He also does a very good job of fighting long, which is significant in this fight because he's 6'3" with a 75.5 inch reach, and Frevola is only 5'9" with a 71 inch reach. So Turner's going to have a really decent size advantage, height advantage, and also reach advantage. But as we know, that can be a strength and also a weakness, because a lot of these guys who are abnormally tall for their division also struggle with takedown defense. And Jalen Turner has a long, lean, skinny frame, which means he really isn't the best at defending takedowns at all. Now, Matt Frevola isn't a particularly strong or technical wrestler, but he is skilled on the ground. He does have a nice deep reactive double leg takedown, and he does a reasonably good job of chaining his takedowns together and dragging his opponents to the ground. He also has pretty good cardio. He can fight at a high pace for 15 minutes, which means he can shoot relentlessly on his opponents for 15 minutes without fear of gassing out. So if we take a look at Jalen Turner and where he's at in terms of wrestling, this fight is basically going to come down to whether or not he can keep this fight standing or not. Because Jalen Turner is very fast, very technical, very dangerous, hard to hit. I think if this fight stays standing, I see Jalen Turner dominating and probably getting a KO win. I see him picking Frevola apart and just being the better overall striker. You know, Frevola's way too easy to hit, takes way too much damage, and Jalen Turner's got legit one-punch KO power in the wide range of strikes that he places. So this fight is going to come down to whether he can keep this fight standing or not. The problem with Turner is, and evaluating where his takedown defense is, as you can see from his record, the majority of his fights have ended in round 1. And that means we don't really have a lot of information on where his takedown defense is currently at. To try and gauge where Jalen Turner's takedown defense might be, we literally have to go all the way back to 2016 when he fought Andrew Langdon. He actually lost the split decision here. And that's a bit of a problem because, you know, Jalen Turner's now 23 years old. This fight was, you know, a good 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. Jalen Turner is bound to have improved significantly since then. So I am going to show you some footage from this fight from back in 2016 against Andrew Langdon to show you some potential issues with Jalen Turner, but it's very possible that he could be a completely different fighter now. It's possible that within 2.5 years he could have improved his takedown defense significantly, because back then he would have only been 20 or 21 years old, and we know fighters make significant improvements at the early stage in their career when they're like a sponge absorbing new techniques. So what I'm basically trying to say is I'm going to show you some footage now of Jalen Turner against Andrew Langdon, but I do expect Turner to have improved a lot since then, so it might not be relevant anymore. But anyway, let's go into it. And I just want to show you some positives and negatives about Jalen Turner's takedown defense and grappling. So the first thing that I want to show you is that you can see this is very early on in the fight, as soon as the fight starts, basically in the first round. And you will see straight away that Jalen Turner, when his opponent shoots in there, shows off very, very strong hips. As soon as his opponent shoots, you know, shows very, very strong hips to stuff the initial takedown attempt. And what I also like about Turner, what he did there, is that he knew in order to defend the takedown, he needed to find the cage. He needed to get his back against the cage to be able to use the cage as a tool to defend the takedown. So that's the first thing that I really like that Jalen Turner does here. Watch as Langdon shoots in, you can see Turner showing off really strong hips here, and then knows that he needs to get his back to the cage. And then what he does in this position here, he's done a really good job of stuffing the initial takedown defense by using his strong hips. And what he then does here is he prevents Langdon from getting anywhere near his legs, which is what I really like. Notice how he prevents Langdon from getting in on his legs. Does a good job of creating a good amount of distance between Langdon and his legs so that Langdon can't drive through on a double leg takedown. And also notice in this little sequence here how he does a good job of getting the underhooks in play here, which also makes it really difficult for Langdon to drive through and complete the takedown. Notice how Turner goes with the underhooks there, and then basically again prevents Langdon from getting in on his legs. But the mistake he makes here, watch how he puts his right leg forward. His right leg gets caught there momentarily, which enables Langdon to get a hold of the leg, start to work a takedown on the single leg. Now here, if we just go back a few seconds here, Jalen Turner's completely out of danger at this point here. Notice how Langdon has absolutely nothing in this position. Jalen Turner's got his legs clear. Langdon can't get his hands anywhere near, you know, Turner's legs to start working for a takedown. Doesn't have control of Turner's body. Langdon's offensive wrestle at this point has been completely shut down by Turner. So what Turner should now be looking to do is disengage from this position and stand back up. But instead, for whatever reason, he starts to fish for a dash choke. As you can see here, starts to work for a dash choke. and for whatever reason gets overconfident and kind of just pulls guard, rolls to his back on a dash choke. But his opponent's in a strong position to defend inside control. And then what actually winds up happening is that Turner just has to give up on it and give up top position. So very, very bad fight IQ there. You could see Jalen Turner doing a really good job of defending the takedowns, showing strong hips, the ability to get underhooks in play early, the ability to clear his legs of his opponent's hands to prevent them from grabbing hold of a leg and working for a single or double leg takedown. But then he makes a really, really rookie mistake in going for that dash choke and giving up top position. Now, the fight then progresses for the next few minutes, actually, with Langdon just cruising in top position. And you can see Jalen Turner's really weak off his back here. We're scrolling minutes and minutes into this fight, and Turner's still on his back, can't work his way back to his feet. But if we get to this point in the fight, you can see that the takedown was initially in the center of the cage, and now you can see that Turner has done a good job of kind of scooting back gradually as the minutes have worn on. He's been on the ground for 2.5 minutes now on his back. But one good thing that he has done here is he has managed to get his back closer and closer to the cage so he can start to use the cage to stand back up. So if we resume the footage here, you can see that at this point Turner knows he needs to get his back to the cage, and finally he does, and now he can use the cage to stand back up. But there are a lot of mistakes again that he makes in this position. Notice how as he stands back up, he doesn't keep his back tight to the cage. When you're using the cage to stand back up, you should have your back pinned very, very tightly to the cage so that your opponent can't take you back. But here you can see there's a good amount of space there, and Langdon actually baits him into standing back up. He gives him enough space to stand back up so that he can then move and take the back, which you can now see here. Notice how Langdon's got his right leg in between the cage and Jalen Turner's back. If Turner would have been able to have kept his back tight to the cage, Langdon would not have been able to get his leg into that position. And there you see Langdon working to take the back. But the mistake that Langdon's made here is that he hasn't got two hooks in while trying to work for the rear naked choke, which gives Turner the space he needs to actually explode into top position. Now here you could see Turner is in a really strong position here to explode into top position, but for whatever reason he hesitates and doesn't take it. Finally, he does fully commit to it and actually winds up in top position. But again, you'll see another issue with Jalen Turner's ground game in a second, as he easily gets put back against the cage by Langdon. Langdon literally just sits back up and pushes him back against the cage, which shows on the ground Turner very naive, very weak in the scrambles. Lost a lot of these scrambles, had a lot of opportunities there against the cage to explode into top position, just maintain top position and see out the round, or explode back to his feet, and he didn't take it. He kept putting himself in bad positions. So now if we go a bit further into the fight, we're going to go quite a bit further into the fight actually, into the beginning of the second round. And I just want to show you that again, this is right at the beginning of the second round, and you can see again Jalen Turner showing off really, really, really strong hips here as the initial takedown shot comes in. So you see him show very strong hips here as Langdon shoots in. Nice strong hips, but the mistake that he makes here, he doesn't actually do a very good job of clearing his legs here. You see Langdon gets in on a nice deep single leg. But at this point, when your opponent's got a single leg, is jumping on a single leg, you should be trying to prevent them from connecting their hands together. And the way you do that is by going to double underhooks. At this point in the sequence, Turner should be fighting to get underhooks in play. But instead of doing that, he actually chooses to strike his opponent instead. And that gives Langdon an opportunity to turn the corner and wind up in top position. You can see it here. Because I paused it, you couldn't see it very good. But when you watch it in real time, Jalen Turner goes to throw a strike there. And because of that, it enables his opponent in that split second to get a deeper hold of the single leg, turn the corner, and wind up in top position. So just another, it's only a split second, but Turner, in that split second, enabled Lagden to turn the corner and wind up in top position. MMA is a game of inches, and things like that can get you into trouble, these little details. And then you can see, if we just let this sequence play out here, Lagden hasn't fully established a dominant position here, but he's getting close. And here Turner actually manages to get in top position, but he should be trying to just disengage from this position and get out of there. But he doesn't. He chooses to engage in another grappling exchange with Lagden and winds up again in a really sloppy 50-50 kind of scrappy exchange on the ground. Again, instead of trying to establish a dominant top position or just getting out of there and standing back up, getting back in the kickboxing range where he's at his best, Turner just hangs around in this position on the ground and winds up again on the bottom. And then something even more concerning, he goes the body triangle off the bottom, which again is a very bad idea, because when you go to the body triangle on the bottom, you're basically conceding top position. There's not a position that you can use to improve your position or scramble back to your feet. You're kind of just shutting down your opponent's offense and accepting being on the bottom. And as we know, more often than not, being on the bottom is a losing position in MMA. So again, some really weak, bad decisions that Jalen Turner makes on the ground and when defending takedowns. And then he spends another long period of time on the bottom because he's not very good off his back at all. And then if we skip to the final thing that I want to show you, just another really quick one. If we go to this point in the fight, which is now at the beginning of the third round, just again, you'll see him show off some strong hips. Very, very strong hips. But again, takes some risks with some flashy techniques, enabling his opponent to tie him up, enabling his opponent to get hold of a single leg, and again, his opponent turns the corner and eventually puts him on his back. Any second now. You know, I don't want to waste your time, show you too much, but you can see that Turner makes some really questionable decisions on the ground, takes a lot of risks, puts himself in bad positions, and not the kind of guy that you would trust against a really aggressive, hungry wrestler like Frevola, who is relentless and persistent. So from a betting point of view, if we look at this fight, the average odds currently available on Jalen Turner are around about 1.77, which is minus 130, giving him an implied probability of 57%. There's no way that I can bet Jalen Turner after what I've just showed you. Just questionable decision making when defending takedowns and on the ground. Like I say, it's very possible in the last 2.5 years that he could have made massive jumps to his grappling and his takedown defense, but until we see it, it's dangerous to assume. So Jalen Turner is too much of a risk for me here. I do expect him to have improved a lot, but I'm not interested in betting him as a favourite. I need to see it first. And then if we look at Frevola, his current average odds available are around about 2.10, which is plus 110, giving him an implied probability of 48%. And again, I'm not interested in betting Frevola either, because his striking defense is so bad that if Jalen Turner has significantly improved his takedown defense and he does keep this fight standing, I think Turner wins this fight by knockout. I think that Frevola is just way too easy to hit not to get caught with a bomb. So that is it for that fight as well, guys. Now, I did kind of I guess honeydick you a little bit in the beginning of this fight when I said this card was much better for betting, and I said the last two cards, the last two UFC events, if you watch my videos for those events, I would have been like, pass on this fight, pass on this fight, pass on this fight. And I've kicked off part one of this video for UFC 236, also telling you to pass on the first two fights. So what the fuck's going on? Well, that is about to change, guys, because I can tell you that the odds for the next fight that I want to talk about between Kelvin Gastelum and Israel Adesanya are absolutely fucking ridiculous. They're just silly. They're so inaccurate. It's just ridiculous. There's amazing value on one of these fighters, guys. And I want you to let me know in the comments below whether you agree or disagree with my assessment of this fight. Because I can tell you right now, that Israel Adesanya will be my biggest bet of the year so far. Now, I know we're only 3 months into the year, but the odds on this fight are literally insane. They make no sense to me. They're very inaccurate. Adesanya is going to be my biggest monetary bet of the year so far. And let me talk to you about why I feel that way. So, guys, before we get into talking about this fight, right? I just want to let you know that the MMA media hype machine is going to be in full effect over these next few days or weeks leading up to UFC 236. They are going to put out all the countdown videos, the embedded videos, writing articles, interviews, MMA Hour, all this kind of shit to try and convince you that this is a very competitive fight between two well-matched fighters. Don't listen to them. Also, don't listen to all the guys on Twitter that love chasing dogs and they wiki cap fights. They just look at win-loss records on Wikipedia and they think they're experts. Don't listen to those guys either. And above all else, don't listen to the Muppets on the Sherdog forums that will spin you some bullshit about Kelvin Gastelum being a strong wrestler who might be able to take Adesanya down and grind him out. It's absolute bollocks. It's never going to happen. I'm going to show you the true facts, or as many of the true facts as I can, and then you can make your own mind up. So I think Adesanya is an amazing bet. Don't let people fool you into thinking otherwise. If you don't believe what I say, pass on the fight. That is what. If you don't trust my judgment on thinking Adesanya is a good bet, just don't bet on the fight. Just pass. But please don't bet Gastelum. You may as well set fire to your money because it's a terrible bet. Now, anything can happen in MMA. I'm not saying Gastelum can't win. He can absolutely win. Anything can happen in MMA. Adesanya could have a bad weight cut, come in with a broken foot and a broken hand and get dominated. Adesanya could get flash KO'd in 10 seconds. We know anything can happen in MMA. But if both guys show up and perform to their full potential, I believe Israel Adesanya absolutely dominates Kelvin Gastelum like 8 or 9 times out of 10. And the first reason why I think Adesanya is such a good bet in this fight is because of the size difference. Now, guys, please, there are weight classes in combat sports for a reason. Size matters, guys. Size really matters, or else we wouldn't have weight classes. And the bigger the size difference, the higher probability, the higher percentage chance that the bigger fighter wins. It's just a fact. The stats are out there. You can check them out for yourself. And look at the size difference, guys, between Kelvin Gastelum and Israel Adesanya. This was at the UFC 236 press conference from a few weeks back. Look at that size difference, guys. Both these guys are wearing trainers. Adesanya's not in high heels. And just look at the size difference there. Adesanya actually making fun of him. If we just scroll back a few minutes there until they walk up again, you can just see Adesanya absolutely towers over Kelvin Gastelum. Literally towers over him. Now, look at this, what I'm showing you in front of you, right? How is Gastelum going to get inside and land significant punches? Because he doesn't really throw kicks. Gastelum's got more of a pure boxing style. Tell me how he gets into boxing range, which is basically where Dana White has stood, and lands his power punches on Adesanya. For a start, he's going to be aiming upwards because of the height difference. Adesanya is 6 inches taller. Tell me how he's going to be able to do that. This size difference is massive. Adesanya is 6 inches taller and he's got a 9-inch reach advantage. Now, I use this analogy all the time, but if two guys get into a stick fight, the guy with the longer stick has a huge advantage. Look at this size difference, guys. Now, if these guys were equal, Adesanya would have a huge advantage if they had equal skills. The size difference alone would give Adesanya a huge advantage. We know, if you read in Fightnomics, we know the fighters who have a 9-inch reach advantage win around 70% of the time. So just to bring the odds up for a sec, just literally betting blind on Adesanya, his current average odds you can get around 1.59, which is minus 170. The implied probability on Israel Adesanya at the moment is 63%. We know fighters with a 9-inch reach advantage on average wins 70% of the time. So if you just bet Adesanya blind, you are getting a 7% margin on the betting sites, without even taking into consideration all the other shit, all the other areas where Adesanya has an advantage. This is crazy. These odds are so inaccurate. The bookies are crazy, and what's even worse is the betting public, the casual bettors that bet on MMA, are improving the odds on Adesanya by betting Gastelum. Who the fuck is betting Gastelum? It's like one of the worst bets of the year. It's a terrible bet. It is a terrible, terrible bet. Gastelum's a terrible bet, guys. I hate to break it to you. Let's go into it. So we know if you blind bet Adesanya with a 9-inch reach advantage, he has a 70% chance of winning based on the numbers. Forget about the fact that Adesanya's got an amazing chin, amazing cardio, great footwork, super high level kickboxing technique, fights long, knows how to use his range. Israel Adesanya, skill for skill from a technical perspective, is a significantly better striker than Kelvin Gastelum, and he has a 9-inch reach advantage, and he has a 6-inch height advantage. And the bookies are giving us an implied probability of 63%. Are you fucking crazy? That is just so inaccurate. This is why there's so much money to be made in MMA betting. Because I don't care if Gastelum goes out and KOs Adesanya dead in 20 seconds. It can happen. I don't care. Adesanya is still an amazing bet. Now there will be morons out there that disagree, and they'll come back in a couple of weeks' time and troll in the comments and saying Gastelum is amazing, Adesanya is a terrible bet, blah blah blah. But guys, in the cold light of day, 2 weeks before the event, based on all the information we've got available to us, Adesanya is one of the best bets of this year. And there's nothing anyone can tell me to make me think otherwise, because there's no data or information out there that can basically disprove what I'm saying. And something I have been seeing some people say online is that Gastelum can use his wrestling. Gastelum can, take Adesanya down and grind him out. And all I have to say to those people is, are you blind? Do you even watch MMA? Kelvin Gastelum is a very low-level grappler, low-level offensive wrestler, weak offensive wrestler, and very, very low-level on the ground. Go back and watch his past fights and tell me otherwise. I'm sure he took a few guys down on The Ultimate Fighter and grinded them out from top position, but there's no way he's going to be able to take Adesanya down and hold him down. Wrestling is not a path to victory for Kelvin Gastelum. Trust me on that. The only way that he could have success with his wrestling is if he were to rock or drop Adesanya and jump on a submission, or if Adesanya comes in this fight with like a blown ACL or a broken foot or something. It's possible. Fighters fight injured all the time. But if both guys show up and perform their full potential, there's no way Gastelum's going to take Adesanya down and grind him out. If Gastelum does hit a takedown, Adesanya will pop back to his feet. Adesanya does a great job of quickly scrambling back to his feet. You know, I talk about this a lot, the alpha male style of takedown defense, where if you get taken down, you should never let your opponent flatten both shoulders on the canvas and establish a dominant position. Adesanya doesn't. He's brilliant at instantly popping back up. As soon as his butt feels the ground, he instantly explodes back to his feet. Adesanya's tough to hold down. So I don't know really what else to tell you on this fight, guys. Look. This is what I'm going to say to summarise. I don't even care what the implied probability is on Gastelum. I'll just have a look for the hell of it. 2.50. His odds currently around 2.50, giving that's a money line odds of plus 150 for an implied probability of 40%. I literally couldn't care what his odds are, because Adesanya at 1.59, which is minus 170 for an implied probability of 63%, is one of the best bets of the year, win or lose. I love it. I love Adesanya here. He is going to be one of my biggest bets of the year, guys. And like I say, anything can happen in MMA. Don't go too big on Adesanya. Don't sell your car. Don't sell your wife. Don't sell your kids and bet on him. Anything can happen. Gastelum could fucking catch him in a flying triangle inside 30 seconds or knock him out dead. He could win a crazy split decision because Adesanya adrenaline dumps early and gasses out. All kinds of crazy shit can happen in MMA, right? But based on everything we know, based on what both fighters bring to the table, based on if both fighters show up and perform their full potential. There's a tremendous amount of value in Adesanya here. I believe he should be a much bigger favourite. I actually believe that Adesanya should be close to a 1.30 favourite here. So there's a massive amount of value here. I'm huge on Adesanya. It's my biggest bet of the year. That doesn't mean he's going to win. I'm not psychic. I haven't got a crystal ball. Fighters fight with bad injuries all the time. They have bad weight cuts. They do dumb shit. Their opponent shows up and flash KOs them or whatever. Like, all I'm saying is Adesanya is a fucking good bet, win or lose. He can definitely lose, but he should win. So I hope you appreciate this video, guys. And remember, I'm going to get parts 1 to... Well, this is part 1. But I'm going to get parts 2, 3 and 4 to this video out very, very soon. And if you want me to do that bonus live stream video on fight day, where I give you a prop bet for every single fight taking place at UFC 236. And I also answer all your questions about the fights taking place at UFC 236. Please hit the like button below. And if every video I put out, part 1, 2, 3 and 4, if they all get 150 likes... I will do that live stream, and I will also continue to do these live stream videos over the next few weeks when I'm ahead on my research. But to be honest with you, by probably early May, I'll fall behind on my research again, and then I'll probably have to ditch the live stream videos. But I promise you, I will do a live stream for this video if every video, definitely do a live stream video for UFC 236 if I get 150 likes on every video, and I will definitely continue to do the live streams while I have the time to do them. So nice one, guys. Please hit the subscribe button below if you haven't already, and I'll be back tomorrow breaking down another 3 fights from a betting perspective.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.